Spy Family Season 2 is mostly a series of small episode, half-episode segments where the main cast members that don't typically interact with each other, and then a few parts of it are actually dedicated to exploring a little bit more of the side cast. So it is a season that is primarily dedicated to, I would say at least 50% of it, we'll get to it, dedicated to just fleshing out the main and side cast a little bit more and a little more of their relationships. Normally, I would appreciate that, and I would think that would be a good thing, but admittedly, a lot of these half-episode segments are not actually all that interesting, and a lot of it just sort of reinforces information we already had about the character, and so a good half of this season actually ends up coming off really dull. The other half of this season, which is actually more in the middle, so it's a little sandwiched, honestly, is an entire arc dedicated to Yor, and I think it might be the longest story arc in the show so far, which is several episodes dedicated to Yor having to protect someone on a cruise liner that is being constantly attacked by other assassins. And so the show takes a little bit of a sort of action show vibe during these segments that are rarely interspersed with Anya interacting with Lloyd for some comedic segments, but it does take itself very seriously. And it does sort of dismiss a thought that I had previously, which was that I was sort of under the assumption that Spy Family was attempting to avoid showing Yor doing her assassin stuff. I thought it was afraid to show that level of violence, and to an extent, it does still seem to be afraid to show that level of violence, but I will also say that it only slightly shied away from it, and there is actually a surprising amount of blood and murder in this story arc. It was actually interesting, although I will say that the conclusion of this ends with Yor's character arc going in a direction I genuinely did not expect, and I need to talk about it because it's very important to the series going forward, which is that Yor sort of reaffirms her beliefs in her assassination jobs as an essential component to protect specifically her brother, to the point where she is willing to risk her life and possibly leave and possibly die and essentially leave her current family, which also not only reinforces Yor's previous personality traits, but it also reinforces a very large underlying issue with Spy Family, which is that Lloyd is planning to leave at the end of this, and Yor, even though she seemed more attached than Lloyd, is actually, if anything, revealed in this arc to be probably the main family member, the least attached to the family at this point. And so what we have is a fake family where really only Anya is committed to the family, although there is a gag she tries to replace Yor with Becky during this arc, but she goes back to Yor, and I'm not taking that super seriously because it's Anya. Regardless, the major issue that Spy Family has had and has been faced with the entire time is the fact that the family is attached to each other more out of convenience than a sort of familial love. And the Yor arc, although exciting, reinforces the issues throughout the entire series, where Lloyd seems to be getting more attached to his family and more soft-hearted. Yor actually takes this chance in this arc to become actively almost more cold and distant, although it is resolved with her spending time with her family in a whole family get-together day afterward, but that's still undercut by literally the previous episode. So even if she is now justifying this, and it's mostly just established that she's doing this for her younger brother, but even if it's now established that she's doing it for the entirety of the family, it does still create this distance. And I think this is sort of a step back as far as Spy Family goes, because the major benefit of the show and joy that comes from watching the show is finding this found family become more attached to each other. And so when we have a season where a good 50% of it just sort of either deals with relationships that we already had a semi-idea from but weren't particularly interesting, could be kind of dull, or reinforces character traits we already know, and then we have Yor sort of taking a step backward. And the fact that unlike season 1, season 2 does not appear to be split into two cores. I think they took people off of season 2 and I think they probably decided not to do a second season just so they could do a movie. But the movie, I believe, is not in canon. And so season 2 sort of almost introduces a pacing issue with the series, where it feels like at the end of it, at worst, everyone is going backwards, and at best, season 2 didn't make any progress. Twitch and Discord in the description. I've been Sacrobolic. You're Envoy of Hope. Bye-bye.